Hi friends, host Eric here, host of Talking with Fans People, and yesterday I made a little video called Local Typology News, which was basically Eric's feeling, kind of emo, just sort of talking things out, etc. But one of the things that I did in that video was complain a little bit. And naturally, what's going to happen anytime you complain is that people are going to propose solutions. And I understand this because when people complain, I propose solutions, and when people don't listen to my solutions, I always say, well, what are you complaining for then? It's like, if you want to complain, then be ready to hear some solutions, or else be ready to be accused of problem admiration. So I get it. I get that when I do complain, or whine about not having enough subscribers or views or something, or being last in line typologically, is specifically what I was complaining about yesterday with like YouTube sending people everywhere but here first, But the thing is this. Please note that when I complain, I'm actually not looking for solutions. And here's the deal. I get proposals from people all the time about things that I should do, right? Like, you should do this, you should do it this way, or have you tried this, or blah. So, Sean sent me a long email talking about Destiny, the debate person, right? And this is the problem that I have, which is people who watch my channel want to, generally speaking, send me ideas. But I don't need any ideas. I've got too many ideas already. I've got too many possible things I could do already. So, and when people who take action, that's fantastic, but it's not necessarily action that's taken by people who've got the clearest idea about what ought to be done, and it's not necessarily going to work. So, like, Sean spent a long time writing me this big email. As I said to somebody in the past who said, okay, well, if you're so convinced that I should go debate modern day debate, then you make it happen. And that individual did try to make it happen, but it didn't happen. And the reason is because, as I discovered with modern day debate, and would discover with Destiny as well, I'm sure if I tried this, is, look, Destiny doesn't want to debate smart people. He doesn't want to debate me. For a lot of reasons. If he's as good as I am, there won't be anything to debate. We'll both mostly agree on things, and and regardless, we'll present our statements such that there's not a lot of meat there for clash, right? It's going to be difficult. If he's good, there won't be that much clash, because it's going to be really tricky to pin either of us down somewhere where we're subject to defeat. And that's how it is with people who are that good, And if he is really good, and we have a really good dialectical discussion or something, his audience won't be interested in that. They're looking for fireworks. They're looking for him to argue against some idiot. And for him to then make fun of how dumb they are or something, or reveal how dumb they are or something like that. That's his MO, more or less. Now, Sean says, well, he's an ENFP. Well, he may very well be, but that means he's less likely to want to have any particular reason to talk to me than more likely. He's already filling that niche over there, And like I said, most importantly, debate is a tricky thing to get me networked in at all, because most people who claim to be doing it aren't doing it. Even those who are really successful at doing it, like Destiny, almost certainly aren't as good as I am, because I'm an actual debate coach. So I wasn't just a debater. I was, but I wasn't just a debater. I wasn't just a debate coach. I was, but I was both. And I was a very, very successful debate coach for a good reason. It's like, there's not, and this is the same problem I have in the typological community. The reason why it's difficult for me to network with people is because there's no advantage for them, right? If you're dealing with me on a debate level, you're just going to get your own sort of status taken down a notch. And if you're dealing with me on a cognitive function level, same thing. The only place where, in theory, I could collaborate more actively with other YouTubers would be music, but that's not how music works. You can't make music by committee. Maybe comedy or something, but it's hard to find somebody really funny. You need to have a good straight man. Or Rachel's as good a straight man as I can ask for if I want to do like riffing comedy kind of unscripted stuff. So anyway, I frequently get these kind of emails saying, well, you should do, here's the basic problem in summation. YT's reality is not one that's particularly crafted for my reality because of my FINENI relationships mostly, which is to say, I do what I want to do. I have a lot of different ideas, and each of them, in some sense, I want it to resonate on an NI level. But because there's so much diversity in what I do, there's no way I can get the channel to resonate on an NI level. Some people have said in the past, well, why don't you have separate channels for separate things? I mean, the notion that I need to consider possibilities like that I haven't considered them yet, is insane, of course. I'm well aware that there are lots of different strategies that I could do that would be successful. For example, Sean said in his email, like, well, you should have Olga on to do some NETI tests for us to show what it's like for ENT. Well, I've done that before. That video already exists, And this happens all the time to me. People say, you should do this. Well, I have done that. Oh, well, point is, I get it. It's easy for you to sit there and go, this is what Eric should do differently if he wants to be successful. But the problem isn't that I don't know about that possibility, right? The problem is that I have so many things I do want to spend time doing. I really don't have time for your plan. And everybody always underestimates the extent to which their plan is time intensive for me, right? People spend a huge amount of time writing me an email telling me what they think I should do to be more successful, but they won't spend any time sending somebody else an email trying to set something up for me, right? So that's the same problem I have. I don't want to do that either. I don't like that. It's like you got to go in fishing with good FE. You got to set it up. You got to be like an INFJ who goes to the channel, watches some of their stuff, says some nice things about it, blah, blah, blah. There's a whole bunch of shit you got to do. And the fact is, I'm not really that guy, You're not going to get that person when you talk to me. You're going to get somebody who's intimidating to most people, because most people don't go around saying they're right exclusively about things and arguing points to try to eliminate the possibility that anybody would give that other party any legitimacy in terms of their ideation, because there are very, very few things in life, like cognitive functions, if any others that I can think of, where there is a correct interpretation, there's a failure to recognize it in the status quo, that it's some sort of large explanation, like a theory of some sort, etc. All these other components that are in place, but that it hasn't been ironed out yet. That moment in time for an idea or concept and explanation, right, is right now with cognitive functions. I happen to be the guy who's there to say, actually play tectonics or whatever. But remember, Jung is, all I've done is finish the work that Jung said, somebody needs to figure this out, basically. And nobody has heretofore. And there have been multiple attempts, but people have sort of figured out certain things, gotten part right, All I did was sew all the correct parts together within a correct frame. And the problem was, before, people's understanding of functions was predicated on a false frame, which is they didn't start with the notion of fields, objects, force vectors, and agency and stuff like that in a way that would make it simulatable. And so what I've done is I've basically said, if we were going to simulate this is how the information flows would look like. This is where the fields would be. This would be counted as objects. It would be different kinds of objects. and I've also basically dealt with it in a way that's philosophically stout. So it's based on a few axiomatic observational realities. Like the thing I read from Einstein was saying, like, it's that kind of theory, right? But what does that mean? It means it's more intellectually robust than the other kind of theory, and less subject to change and being challenged over time. Because that's what NTPs do. So, if you think about it, Einstein figured out relativity. What does that mean? He figured out that we cannot understand time except insofar as we understand it relative to an observer. And in order to try to eliminate that particularist non-generalizability that comes from beginning with each individual observer, he framed it in the terms of the speed of light, right? Because if we frame it in terms of the speed of light, then we have to include an object that's functioning as an observer that's moving or not in some direction against the speed of light, right? With or against the speed of light. So, the reason it's called theory of relativity is because it understands then that time and space are linked. That the speed of light and the directionality of the observer are going to cause different people to experience the passage of time differently in different contexts, and that we can't treat it as though it were, the alternative approach to time is the atomic clock. It doesn't get off time, but by points of a millisecond, by meow, right? And so that's really locking things down that are phenomenologically consistent. Things like the sun moving across the sky and planets and stuff like that, such that we have a particular certainty regarding the time. But that is the exact opposite of a correct explanation regarding the time, right? The correct explanation involves understanding the role of the observer. So, the thing is, an NTP is always is what you might call a frame walker, INTP or ENTP. When I talked to Peter the other day, I asked him the question about his observation of force. This is a fundamental debate in physics. The issue is it's not viewed as a force, and yet when it's spoken of in words, it's treated like one. So, in other words, it's treated as something that causes things to happen. This is a fundamental problem that physicists have with integrating their math into something that works linguistically. And if you're going to claim that something's in a state of superposition, namely that it doesn't exist yet in one status or another, and something collapses it, well, then that thing that collapses it has some mechanism by which it's collapsing it, right? I've long stated that fundamentally observation is a force, even if we can't measure it, and that it's the precondition to all other intellectual work, So anything else we might say, do, observe, talk about, map, explain, whatever, it begins with an understanding of the role of the observer in it. So if you were going to call it something other than a force, you'd call it like some sort of cosmological constant, like M or C or whatever. And then how you would mathematically represent that isn't clear, right? Because it's really the capacity to take action, the capacity to collapse things from superposition that defines what agency is, right? So anyway, when I'm complaining, note that I am not seeking solutions, okay? And I get that I am subject to the critique that I'm just problem admiring then. Sometimes I get FI and I do a little problem admiring. But that's why at the end of that video I said, I don't have anything to complain about. I have nothing to complain about because I'm making these choices on purpose, right? Like, I don't want to do those things that John suggests. I don't want to do any of them. He talks about how important it is to network in a community in order to get YouTube or whatever else to recognize your legitimacy as a party on the matter. Except that's not this kind of thing, right? It's like instead of having us all be plate tectonics aficionados talking about plate tectonics, I got everybody else around me talking about expanding Earth theory for why continents drift apart, and I'm the one saying, no, you're all wrong, it's plate tectonics. Now, when the guy who invented plate tectonics presented this at a conference of his colleagues, back when he originally presented it, they laughed him out of the room and told him he was insane, and etc., right? And probably, I guarantee you, they got really mad and said things like, boy, Eric really does think the rest of us are worms, doesn't he? Which I read from somebody the other day. No, I don't think the rest of you are worms. I think you're wrong or in agreement with me. And that's okay. People are wrong. You know, sometimes an individual comes up with the correct interpretation that the rest of the individuals failed to do so, right? And instead of being a little pissy bitches, why don't you actually listen to me? Is what I would say to all of these assorted community members. You know, Eric Thor, after this live stream where I called him to task for not calling Melissa Talks to task for not being an AHP. Then he went back and complained about me being disrespectful and still didn't do any of his research and look at the original Typology video as I had indicated he should, which would have easily enough totally dispatched any of his claims regarding me not being somehow me not doing it right, you know? Like that you have to be very sensitive and careful when you do Typology video or something. He hasn't even seen the fucking thing, obviously, or he wouldn't be thinking that about me, right? And the point is, I say to him, Eric, you don't have to be an enemy. You just can't stubbornly cling to your wrongness and be an ally, really, around me, because I will keep pointing out, why are you so wrong? You don't have to be. You could listen to me. But you know, I'm the plate tectonics guy. Everybody else is expanding Earth. They don't like the fact that I'm invalidating their legitimacy as experts. And I understand that. So they need to stop being wrong. And then I will stop delegitimizing them as experts. Which means they need to listen to me and start saying what I'm saying about it. That's all there is to it. So as far as my success on YouTube or whatever, I'm limited to the extent to which I can be successful here. And that's okay, I guess. You know? It's like, I understand that I'm too combative, I'm too contradictory, I'm too insistent, I'm too exclusively correct about the things that I'm in disagreement with people about. Whether it's politics, whether it's debate, whether it's cognitive functions, it's the same in every case, right? The only difference is, when you're talking about politics or something, individuals each express their own unique display of wrongness, you know. Sometimes they're right about most things and wrong about a couple. Sometimes they're wrong about most things, right about a couple. In general, it's always the same thing. They're frame locked. Like Matthew the other day left a comment. It was just hilariously not understanding things. He was successfully trying to implement this idea that I've been presenting to everybody, that the problem with our political conversations is that they are mythological fundamentally and not political, which is to say they are not about policy, they are about ideology, and they are about team position, and they are about making up mythical enemies to demonize and hold up as this monolithic group that has no redeeming value so that we can blame everything on Mia, right? That's mythology we're doing there when we do that. So Matthew wrote this comment complaining about mythology and politics, having heard what I've been saying and such, but then insisted that in the same paragraph that, like, small government is, you know, no government claim to anything is legitimate, or some other libertarian mythology, right? So it's like, at any given moment, I'm dealing with somebody who is either fully meta-rational about the thing, in which case they are floating in a statesman's detached correctness to the extent that they're evaluating their positions on things, that's balancing in careful balance, pragmatism, principle, recognizing that nothing can be totalized ideologically without becoming totalitarian fundamentally. And it's not easy to attain a place of that kind of correctness, the kind of correctness I have, because it requires somebody to have applied the right approach to being correct for decades, and to be deeply, deeply immersed in public policy for decades. So yeah, it's true that am consistently more right than everybody else about politics as well. But unlike typology, everybody else isn't wrong because of any particular reason, or there's no solution. There's no single right answer that I can give anybody. I have to give them a succession of right answers to every specific policy question, and each of them has to be contextualized. That's what politics is, right? It's not mythology. It doesn't. It changes with the breaking news. So am I right about the philosophy / politics / cognitive function stuff? Yeah, absolutely. Am I exclusively right when people disagree with me? Yeah. Well, aren't you wrong about anything, Eric? I'm wrong occasionally about things. Not very much anymore. If I'm talking about it, and it's something that I'm making claims about, I'm either stating right off the bat, these are speculative, these are not claims, or I'm stating claims because I already know in full well that they are the most defensible claims. Occasionally I get caught with a bad piece of information. I still remember the time Jen Exio called me out and pointed out that me saying Hillary Clinton stealing the primaries was illegal was wrong because, as I'd forgotten in that moment, the primaries are totally up to the parties and have it's not considered an election per se as a party matter, and they can do them however they want. So I was wrong when I said that. I got corrected. Those are the kind of things that I'm sometimes wrong about. I'm not, but the note is note this, that as soon as I was corrected, I said thank you for the correction. I updated my knowledge, and I never made that mistake again. This has been going on for decades about every little thing. So that's why I'm more correct. But the thing is, this is not a very good way to make friends and influence people. It's a very poor way to make friends and influence people. People don't want to hear you say that you are right and everybody else is wrong. Nobody wants to hear you say that. In fact, people will hate you if you say that. It doesn't matter how true it is, because it's like Heidegger once pointed out. People don't want their truths true, they want them inclusive. If they're part of your success, then it's great. But if you're excluding them and saying, my success makes you unsuccessful, then they are going to hate you. Unfortunately, with intellectual stuff, success is usually a zero-sum game. To be correct means to excise all those things that are incorrect. And so it's like the question of where species come from, evolution. It's a zero-sum question. There is an explanation that explains it, and we don't have it yet. Evolution, flops around like a dying fish on the deck of a boat, trying to claim that it's flying through the air. But it's not. It doesn't explain anything. It fails to meet its burdens as an affirmation to justify its conclusion or its claim that in fact, it explains where species comes from. To explain that, it would need to provide the mechanism, and it would need to be a mechanism that made sense. It would need to make predictions. It was all kinds of shit that it does make predictions, and they all get falsified. Like, we can conclude for certain that if evolution were correct in its basic understanding of species evolving out of genomes into different genomes through some mechanism of increased complexity that's not specified, because it's certainly not selection of the fittest. They eliminated that a long time ago. But anyway, the point is, if there was any kind of such mechanism, what we would see is increased genetic diversity within a larger species. So if you've got more individuals within a species, and the breadth of the species is more broad geographically, then you see greater genetic diversity within that genome than you do in a genome of a species that's only got 9 members, like California condors or something. I don't know how many there are now, but, you know. But you don't. You don't. There's no corresponding increase in genetic diversity within a genome with population size. So there's clearly no change to the genome going on via some reproductive mechanism. Definitionally, we know the species produce more of the same of themselves and always have. There was this idea being circulated in order to deal with this tough reality that punctuated equilibrium. Sometimes evolution turns on, then it turns off all of a sudden. For no reasons explained, but that is consistent with the fossil record. Well, okay, but it's still not an explanation, and it's recently been falsified. So, it's like, you want to wonder, like, well, Eric, how could it possibly be that you're right and all the other people are wrong? Blah, blah, blah. I mean, how could it be that the whole world of smart-thinking people still believes in evolution, even though it utterly fails to explain anything? No, I'm not a creationist. That also fails utterly to explain anything. So we don't have an explanation. We have lots of speculative notions. Maybe it's the sim, maybe aliens put us here, maybe who knows. But we don't have an explanation. We just don't, and that's the truth. And the problem that we have is that people are so desperate for clarity regarding which narratives are predominant, which narratives ought to win, and so they have so little ambiguity tolerance that they'd rather give the wrong answer than the correct answer. The correct answer is, I don't know. So the truth is, we don't know where species came from. The truth is, I do know how attentional manners successfully allow us to model taxonomy and understand human beings and the differences between them. And I also know that Jung gave us something to figure out, and that nobody prior to me had figured it out properly. And that now it has been figured out properly. We've got a growing body of empirics proving what I'm saying time and time again. And at the end of the day, the marketplace of ideas doesn't operate, it operates in the opposite direction of YouTube. So YouTube wants to celebrate things that gain broad approval, but the marketplace of ideas, it trickles down. So the ideas of tomorrow are debated today in competition flow debate. And then 10 years later, they start trickling into, you start hearing non-intellectuals start echoing those arguments. And the fact is, it's almost inevitable that being out in front produces this result. If I were the kind of person who was focused on or wanted to spend a lot of time networking, I wouldn't be right. I'd be too constrained by my relationships with other parties. There'd be so much, oh God, but if I say this, then my friend here, my friend here, my friend here are all going to suffer in some regard or be delegitimized in some regard. If I were that kind of person, I wouldn't be right, And this is the other reality of cognitive functions. What cognitive functions people will always do is probably a little bit of whatever your suggestion is. It's probably already done it. Whatever your suggestion is, I've probably already done it. I've got over 6,000 videos. and growing every day. The problem is not that I didn't do your suggestion or that I haven't tried it. It's that I don't stick with any one thing, right? So if I wanted to be successful with a YouTube channel, I would need to be one thing. And I am one thing in some sense. I'm Eric. You get a bunch of Eric, regardless of whatever else goes up there. You get more Eric than anybody could possibly ever want. And and that's what you get. And so it's like, okay, well, Eric, do you want to be successful or do you want to be Eric? Well, the truth is, I want to be Eric. And that's all there is to it. And that's all I'm ever going to be is Eric. And I might complain sometimes that Eric's not appreciated enough, but I don't have anything to complain about, because to be Eric means to be appreciated by people who are themselves very much ahead of the curve. Otherwise, they wouldn't be appreciating me. And it means that, it's not a very welcoming place to idiots. If you're an idiot and you come around talking to famous people, you won't last very long before you get really frustrated with me and leave. Because if you're in the live streams and you're saying dumbass shit, I'm gonna come down on you like a ton of bricks. Most of the time. I'm nicer than I used to be, but that's what happens when you spend. I'm 50, almost 51 years old now, and I've been working my way towards this level of completion almost the whole time, right? Like, I've been trying to figure shit out since I was 3 years old. At 3 years old, I remember trying to figure out little shit, like little philosophy matters. At like probably 6 years old, I was jumping across the neighbor's driveway trying to figure out free will. Why? Because my dad had a philosophy PhD. He was probably finishing it around that time. He was probably talking to me about this shit, So I've been trying to figure this shit out for my whole life. And the truth is, I have, finally. I figured it out. That's just all there is. It didn't work. I didn't figure out how to work OBS yet, though. Still trying to work on that.